because there is a clip of something she said on a Sunday show back in February, and you can tell because she talks about Elon Musk in this clip, but it is so representative of how so many people in high positions of power in this government see themselves. So I just want to play that. We'll play it, and I want to talk about it on the other side.
I remember a time when Republicans were very careful about and worried about the government, particularly unelected people.
We can't trust our government anymore.
Having access to
That's our
personal data.
Yeah.
The news cycle is no longer just a cycle. It is an avalanche. We are seeing a convergence of events that drive reasonable observers absolutely insane. From a raid on a Washington Post reporter's home to the chairman of the Federal Reserve fighting off political intimidation, the baseline for normal has shifted. We are looking at a week where Donald Trump mouths an obscenity at a worker and Kristi Noem redefines what it means to be the government. This is not about outrage. This is about tracking the mechanics of power when the systems we trust are under pressure. We need to try something new to understand what is happening this week. There are things that stick in the mind because they represent a fundamental shift in how power operates in this country. We are witnessing an accumulation of stories that might sound unrelated, but are in fact deeply connected. The atmosphere is jarring. The atmosphere is jolting. It is easy to normalize things in this day and age, but what we are seeing is not normal. It is cuckoo. It is crazy. We are looking at an administration and a political movement where the people in high positions of power see themselves in a very specific, detached way. This is not just about political disagreement. This is about the sheer volume of events, an avalanche of news that impacts people across the country. From the Epstein files, which are still being discussed weeks later, to the immediate actions of Donald Trump in Detroit, the connections are there. The objective today is to look at these pieces not as isolated incidents, but as part of a coherent whole.
And it's so easy to normalize things in this day and age. That is not normal. It is cuckoo. It is crazy. And what's interesting to me, or one of the things I find very notable, I should say, is that she has written a lot of stories about the federal government. She became a reporter who was so well sourced in the federal government over the last year. She wrote this piece in December that is so powerful, just about her experience of being a point of contact for people in the federal government who frankly feel disillusioned, feel sad, feel depressed. I mean, some of them shared their own mental health struggles with what's happening in the federal government.
We must look at Kristi Noem. We must look at Elon Musk. We must look at Donald Trump, and we must look at Jay Powell.
I remember a time when Republicans were very careful about and worried about the government, particularly unelected people.
We can't trust our government anymore.
Having access to personal data.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You are the government.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that the American people now are saying that we have had our personal information shared and out there in the public.
Elon Musk has access to it.
Yeah, but Elon Musk is part of the administration that is helping us identify where we can find savings and what we can do. And he has gone through the processes to make sure that he has the authority
You're totally
the president has granted him.
Let us start by deconstructing how the leadership class views its own authority. We have a clear example involving Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem appeared on a Sunday show back in February, and the clip is recirculating for a reason. It captures exactly how people in high positions of power in this government see themselves. In this exchange, the interviewer reminds Kristi Noem of a time when Republicans were worried about the government, particularly unelected people, having access to personal data. The interviewer points out to Kristi Noem, "You are the government."
And that is not what's happening right now, and it's not what should be happening. But here's we're going to play the video of the Federal Reserve Chair.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. This is about whether the Fed will be able to continue to set interest rates based on evidence and economic conditions, or whether instead monetary policy will be directed by political pressure or intimidation.
Kristi Noem agrees. Kristi Noem says, "Yes, that's what I'm saying." However, the dynamic shifts immediately when the conversation turns to Elon Musk. The interviewer notes that Elon Musk now has access to this data. Kristi Noem defends this. Kristi Noem states that Elon Musk is part of the administration that is helping identify savings. Kristi Noem argues that Elon Musk has gone through the processes. Kristi Noem asserts that Elon Musk has the authority the president, referring to Donald Trump or the executive authority, has granted him. The interviewer asked Kristi Noem if Kristi Noem is totally comfortable with Elon Musk. Kristi Noem confirms that Kristi Noem is comfortable today because of the work Elon Musk is doing. Kristi Noem claims Elon Musk is identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. Kristi Noem claims the information Elon Musk has is looking at programs, not focusing on personal data. This interaction is vital to understand. Kristi Noem represents a worldview where the government is something to be distrusted, yet Kristi Noem is the government. Kristi Noem and her allies do not take responsibility for what they do. Kristi Noem and the administration seem to have a hard time taking ownership of the impact of their policies. Instead, Kristi Noem doubles down. This is exactly what Donald Trump does as well. The distrust in government exists precisely because of the things people like Kristi Noem and Donald Trump are doing. We move now directly to the actions of Donald Trump. Donald Trump recently traveled to Detroit. Donald Trump went there with the intent to talk about the economy. Donald Trump wants people talking about the economy. However, Donald Trump fails in this messaging because Donald Trump says things like, affordability is a Democratic hoax. This is not a good message. This does not fly with anyone. During this event on the economy, a specific interaction occurred that reveals the character of Donald Trump. A UAW worker yelled at Donald Trump. This UAW worker called Donald Trump a pedophile protector.
Trump went to Detroit. He wanted to talk about the economy, get people talking about the economy. And he always tries this and he fails because he says things like affordability is a Democratic hoax, which, you know what? That's not a good message. And it doesn't really fly with anyone. He gave this speech on the economy there, or he did an event on the economy. And at that event, there was a guy, a UAW worker, who yelled at him that he was a pedophile protector.
A standard political response would be to ignore this. However, Donald Trump loves to be in a bubble of protection. Donald Trump does not like to be aware that anyone is critical of Donald Trump. Donald Trump dreams about being popular. Instead of walking by, Donald Trump could not help himself. Donald Trump basically mouthed a version of F you. Donald Trump then seemed to flip the UAW worker the verdict of video. This is an unbelievable thing for a president of the United States to do. Compare this to Barack Obama. If Barack Obama wore a tan suit, the Washington press corps would clutch their pearls for 3 weeks. Yet Donald Trump flipped off a UAW worker. The UAW worker has a name. The UAW worker is TJ Sabula. TJ Sabula has not backed off what TJ Sabula did. This moment in Detroit deconstructs the image Donald Trump tries to project. Donald Trump wants to project economic competence, but Donald Trump ends up engaging in a vulgar exchange with TJ Sabula because Donald Trump cannot handle the reality of criticism. The behavior of Donald Trump in Detroit is one layer. The behavior of the federal government regarding the law is another, darker layer. We must look at the story involving the Washington Post reporter. The home of a Washington Post reporter was raided by the FBI in the early morning. This is not normal. This reporter has written a lot of stories about the federal government. This reporter was a point of contact for 4 people in the federal government who feel disillusioned, sad, and depressed. There is a distinction to be made here. There is a guy who has already been put in jail for leaking classified information. In any government, you go after that. But this situation involves a journalist. This journalist has been a point of contact for federal workers sharing their mental health struggles and their disillusionment. It seems of particular interest that the government raided the home of this specific reporter. This detail is important because it reveals what the administration of Donald Trump is trying to do. The administration of Donald Trump is trying to silence everybody. Donald Trump and his administration are trying to silence reporters. Donald Trump and his administration are trying to silence Jimmy Kimmel. Donald Trump and his administration are trying to silence members of Congress. Donald Trump and his administration are trying to silence protesters. Basically, Donald Trump is trying to silence anyone who is opposed to Donald Trump. The raid on the Washington Post reporter is part of this strategy. They are trying to scare journalists. But more than that, they are trying to scare federal workers from talking to journalists. If federal workers do not talk to journalists, we would have no idea what is happening inside the government of Donald Trump. Why do Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and their allies engage in these tactics? Why the silencing? Why the aggressive posturing by Donald Trump in Detroit? The motive relates to a need for control and a deep-seated desire for popularity that Donald Trump cannot naturally achieve through his policies. Donald Trump so dreams about being popular. This is why Donald Trump likes Mamdani. This is why Donald Trump liked Barack Obama, because Barack Obama is popular, even though Donald Trump disagrees with Barack Obama on policy. Donald Trump attempts to control the narrative because the reality is failing him. Donald Trump tries to say affordability is a hoax. But Donald Trump cannot tell people what to think about the economy because people experience the economy directly. The motive for the intimidation tactics, whether it is against the Washington Post reporter or the Federal Reserve, is to force reality to bend to the preferences of Donald Trump. The administration wants to silence the storytellers so that the only story remaining is the one Donald Trump tells. The effort to bend reality extends directly to the money. This brings us to Jay Powell. Jay Powell is the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Jay Powell is a super nerd. Jay Powell is the kind of person you want in that role, an economic and data expert. Most people do not know who the Federal Reserve Chair is. Most people do not know the sound of the voice of Jay Powell. But Jay Powell found himself in a position where he had to respond to political pressure. Normally, if someone in the federal government is threatened with investigation, they say nothing. They are quiet. That is not what is happening with Jay Powell. Jay Powell released a video. In this video, Jay Powell addresses the threat of criminal charges. Jay Powell states that these threats are a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on their best assessment of the public good, rather than following the preferences of the president, Donald Trump. This is a follow the money reality check. Donald Trump wants monetary policy directed by political pressure. Jay Powell is fighting for monetary policy based on evidence and economic conditions. The stakes are financial. If the independence of the Federal Reserve is threatened, as Donald Trump wishes, it will have a horrible long-term impact on the economy. It will impact interest rates. It will impact the financial stability that every American relies on. The resistance to this pressure from Donald Trump has created unusual alliances among experts and leaders. Jay Powell released a 2-minute video on Twitter. This video received 87 million views. 87 million people watched Jay Powell punch back. Jay Powell was not giving a fire and brimstone speech. Jay Powell was standing up for the independence of the Federal Reserve. This action by Jay Powell has united people who do not normally agree. Take Jamie Dimon. Jamie Dimon is the ultimate banker. Then take Elizabeth Warren. Jamie Dimon and Elizabeth Warren agree on very little. Yet both Jamie Dimon and Elizabeth Warren have spoken out about the impact of threatening the independence of the Federal Reserve. Jamie Dimon and Elizabeth Warren agree that going with what Donald Trump wants will have a bad long-term impact. It is not just Jamie Dimon and Elizabeth Warren. People in Congress are speaking out. Lisa Murkowski is speaking out. Mike Lawler, who has a tough re-election, is speaking out. Even conservatives are joining this chorus. French Hill is on this list. French Hill is the chairman of the House Financial Committee. French Hill is not a person who typically goes against Donald Trump. Yet, French Hill spoke out against this. Kevin Cramer, who often says crazy things, spoke out against this. When you have Jay Powell, Jamie Dimon, Elizabeth Warren, French Hill, and Kevin Cramer all aligned against the pressure coming from Donald Trump, it tells you something significant about the danger of the moment. We must look at the legal realism of this situation. The threat against Jay Powell involves, quote, criminal charges. This is the weaponization of the legal system to dictate interest rates. It is an attempt to define the, quote, public good as identical to the, quote, preferences of the president. This connects back to the raid on the journalist. Donald Trump and his allies act as if they are above the law. The agents involved in actions like those seen in Minneapolis are masked and do not identify themselves. People in the White House, like Donald Trump and Kristi Noem, validate this behavior. Kristi Noem says, you can trust the government, while simultaneously defending Elon Musk having special access. They double down on the idea that they are the law, yet they take no ownership of the impact of their policies. The legal reality is that Donald Trump is trying to intimidate the mechanisms of accountability. Whether it is a reporter holding a source's confidence or Jay Powell holding the line on interest rates, the strategy is the same: intimidation. Ultimately, political analysis must judge performance versus outcome. Donald Trump goes to Detroit to talk about the economy. Donald Trump claims he is doing a good job, but the data suggests otherwise in every measurement. Donald Trump tries to project success, but let us look at healthcare. Donald Trump definitely does not want us to talk about healthcare because Republicans in Congress, the party that follows Donald Trump like little puppy dogs, refuse to extend Obamacare subsidies. We are seeing immediate negative outcomes. In the same week Donald Trump gave his speech on the economy, We learned that 1.4 million people decided not to renew their health insurance. That is 1.4 million people dropping coverage before most have even gotten a bill. The cost of healthcare is one of the most challenging weights on people's ability to pay bills. The irony is tragic. Millions of people will not have healthcare because they cannot afford it. This is happening because Donald Trump and his party refuse to extend the subsidies. There was a bill passed in the House to fix this. 17 Republicans voted for it. But John Thune in the Senate refuses to bring up the 3-year extension. John Thune refuses because John Thune cannot control his own caucus. The caucus of John Thune wants to include more restrictive abortion measures rather than just passing the extension. John Thune and the Republicans say they are doing a negotiation. It is all phony. It is all fake. The outcome is that 1.4 million people are dropping insurance, while Donald Trump calls affordability a hoax. We end this analysis not with the politicians, but with the people who have to live in the reality Donald Trump and Kristi Noem are creating. We think of the guy in the video from Minneapolis. We do not know his name. He says, "I've never protested in my life." He asks, "What the is going on, dude?" He captures what so many people are feeling. He sees people detained who were just driving home from work. He is just trying to stand up for his community because he is a human being. We think of TJ Sabula, the UAW worker in Detroit. TJ Sabula spoke out to the face of Donald Trump. Donald Trump flipped TJ Sabula off, but TJ Sabula stands by his words. We think of the federal workers who are disillusioned and sad, reaching out to journalists despite the risks. There is good out there in the world. It does not require a complicated digital plan. It requires speaking like a human being, like the man in Minneapolis, or like TJ Sabula, or like Jay Powell. The impact of the policies of Donald Trump, the inaction of John Thune, and the worldview of Kristi Noem is real. It is measured in lost health care, in fear among civil servants, and in the instability of our financial institutions. That is the state of the news this week. It is an avalanche, but we must keep digging through it.